You're listening to MinerTalk on demand exclusively on 600 ESPN El Paso. Stay up to date with MinerTalk by downloading the free 600 ESPN El Paso mobile app. All right, welcome back. MinerTalk is live. We are presented by the Oscar Arieta Agency. The Oscar Arieta Agency will be at the UTEP versus UTSA game. That's next Saturday, February 11th. They'll be having a Valentine's Day giveaway next Saturday out at their booth. Stop by the Oscar Arieta Agency booth to register to win a $200 gift certificate for a dinner at West Texas Chop House. That's a $200 gift card. All you have to do is register at the Oscar Arieta Agency booth, which will be at the UTEP UTSA game next Saturday. Another night, another day, another loss for UTEP, and it's more of the same for the Miners. 74-69, that's the final for Western Kentucky. 4 losses in a row for Joe Golding is the most in the Joe Golding era right now. This is the most losses in a row that you can look at for a UTEP team dating back to the 2020 season when they lost 5 games in a row from the span of February 1st through February 15th. And I'm going to tell you this, Sal, we understand this. We've been through MinerTalk year after year. This is year 4 of us doing it for basketball. We understand that the month of February is an absolute grind. And what I saw today was a UTEP team that had a 10-point lead in the first half, that dominated at one point, that had 6 3-pointers in the first half, but undisciplinary actions. 3 technical fouls. They took off 1 for Mario McKinney, but 2 technical fouls in the first half, letting their emotions get the best of them in the first half. That should have been a 10-point first half lead going into the break. Instead, Western Kentucky cuts that first half lead. UTEP still goes in with a 4-point lead, 37-33, but the Miners completely are outmatched in the second half, 41-32. They are outscored in the second half by Western Kentucky, and now the Miners have lost 4 in a row, and this 3-game road swing, we thought it was going to be tough. It ended up being brutal for the Miners this stretch.
Yeah, add that on top of the fact that we always talk about tiers. In a way, obviously they won these games, so we know what the results were. But going into the stretch, UTEP trying to find themselves, in a tier below the very top, so to speak, trying to climb back in there. And the same was said for Western and North Texas, who's already riding that ship already. They're a beast.
Right.
But that whole stretch right there, there's a lot of teams kind of are near the same place as UTEP or within reach, and they just completely dropped the ball, unfortunately. It was a brutal start. Yeah,
I like the fact that you mentioned the tiers, Sal, because now there are 3 tiers in Conference USA. The first tier of Conference USA, it's led by Florida Atlantic. That's it. That's the first tier.
Yeah.
And then the second tier is going to be North Texas, UAB, Middle Tennessee, Rice, Louisiana Tech, those teams who are still in the mix. Then the tier after that is the tier who's probably a year away. Florida Atlantic or Florida International, Western Kentucky, Charlotte, UTEP, and UTSA. I would still think UTEP, UTSA, Florida International are kind of a tier below Western Kentucky and Charlotte, but hey, we'll have to see how the rest of the season unfolds. Right now, for the Miners, they are not playing good basketball, Sal.
Yeah, they're really not, and we talked about the tiers, but looking at it right now, in the bottom 3 of Conference USA, so that goes to show you how crucial these games are, especially early on in conference play, because where they were, kind of like middle of the road, now they're at the very bottom, with Charlotte and UTSA. So who they struggled with at times in their games against too.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Sal. Our telephone number is 915-505-6009 to get into MinerTalk. Don't expect much on this show. I expect a lot of frustrated Miner fans. I think the interest is at an all-time low for the UTEP basketball team from what I've seen over the past couple years. Last year, everybody was all in on this team, and they were proving that they could hang in with the best teams in Conference USA and actually beat them. This year, they can hang in with everybody across their schedule. The problem problem is they can't beat them. And for the Miners, they have to get over that hump. They have to find a way to try to get these wins. And I don't think it's this year. We said it. Well, I said it before. I'll say it again. The month of February is an absolute grind. And I feel like for the Miners, this month of February is really taking a toll on them early on. And if they're not able to kind of get over this hump right here, look, they've got a home game against Charlotte. They've got that road game against UTSA. Those are opportunities for the Miners to try to bounce back and secure some victories. But I'm worried about UTEP throughout this stretch. After Charlotte and UTSA, which I would say are both beatable right there, Sal, they've got UAB, North Texas, FIU, and Florida Atlantic. The Miners are going into this next stretch having lost 9 of their last 12 games. They are 4-8 in Conference USA. They've lost 4 in a row, most losses in a row by a UTEP team under head coach Joe Golding. I'm worried about UTEP. They've got to get these next 2 victories under their belt, both Charlotte and UTSA.
Yeah, and you know what, too, kind of looking at these this 4-game stretch, right, from Charlotte all the way to North Texas, looking at those teams, Charlotte, winnable game, and it's at home. UTSA, winnable game, and it's on the road. And then the next 2, those being the monsters of that are North Texas and UAB, some of the tougher teams, but you have them at home. And if you're 10-3 on the season so far at home, this is I don't want to say it's made in the shade because obviously it's not, but it's a step that it's an advantage, so to speak, in these next 4.
Yeah, I think so too, Sal. I just worry about the Miners because if they don't get these victories in these next 2 games, I don't like their chances going into that next stretch, which is going to only get tougher. Our telephone number, 915-505-6009. Let's go to the phone lines right now. We'll welcome on Kurt, who's joining us first. Kurt, what's going on, man? Thanks for giving us a call.
How you guys doing?
We're doing fine. What about you?
Real good. First of all, talk about this Miner basketball team. I'm a season ticket holder. I've been going for several years now, and I think I've seen the worst offensive team I've ever seen in my years of watching UTEP basketball. Very frustrating, and of course, 11 transfers and Coach Golding. I mean, he brought these guys in, but there's no offensive firepower at all down the box on the perimeter. It's the same thing I've been seeing for the last several games, and I don't see any improvement going forward. And it's very, very frustrating. And this is not UTEP basketball from what I grew up watching. And I sure hope this coach and the assistants can bring some guys in that can shoot the ball and of course, play hard defense. But as far as going forward the rest of the season, I don't see them doing anything really with the rest of the conference and the games remaining. What are your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point. I appreciate the phone call. Thanks for weighing in. I'll bring Sal in on this one too. Miners open up the first half shooting well in this game. So I was thinking to myself, man, this is an absolute possibility that the Miners can go on the road and knock off Western Kentucky, which, by the way, we need to set the right expectation. Western Kentucky is probably on the same playing field as UTEP or probably a little step above. They're not that great. They're not a great team in Conference USA. This isn't a team that's going to be killing everybody across the league. But UTEP shoots 40% from the floor tonight. They hit 9 3-pointers, which, hey, they're averaging just 4 every game. So in this one, offensively, it wasn't necessarily an issue until the second half, until they actually needed some buckets. They were 3 of 14 from 3-point range in the second half, 33% from the floor in the second half. They're still not making free throws. They're 60% in this game. It's frustrating for the Miners because it's the same things over and over. Even though they shot well in the first half from 3-point range, that was about it, Sal.
Yeah, and another thing that really plagued them in this game, too, 2 of the things we talked about the most this year, free throw shooting and turnovers.
Yep.
Looking at the numbers here, 11 turnovers, so more turnovers than they had assists. We had another one in the box, unfortunately, but
that's
12
right.
of 20 from the free throw line. Adrian, when in a game, I mean, numbers are numbers, but you lose by 5 and you miss 8 free throws.
Yeah, that's tough. And look, 11 turnovers, you point out, Sal, but Western Kentucky capitalizes off of 16 points off those turnovers. Big shout-out to Jamarian Sharp in this game. 6 blocks against the Miners. UTEP could not do anything in the paint, so you got to give Western Kentucky a little bit of credit for what they were able to do. And I also thought this game was going to be won by whoever won the boards. And Western Kentucky was a +4 advantage on the boards, 39-35. I thought that was a real big difference maker for Western Kentucky. UTEP was not able to get offensive rebounds like they were intending in this game, and defensively they actually suffered by allowing Western Kentucky to get some of those second chance buckets. So that's right there is worrisome for the Miners.
And you know what? I kind of like the game plan for Western Kentucky going into this one, using things that UTEP hasn't been
2-3 zone
efficient.
to open up the game.
So the zone, there we go. That's number one. But then also, you basically say, hey, UTEP, let's see if you can make jump shots and beat us with your jump shots. And it was working in the first half, but ultimately they were not falling, so they tried to attack it a bit more. And guess what happens? You have Sharp down low. And a cool stat that John brought up, by the way, something about 81%. That he has more blocks than 81% of the teams in college basketball. So, and he had 6 today, so that's probably, going to jump up a bit more. However, game plan worked is make UTEP shoot, then they're going to start attacking, but you're going to have the number one shot blocker in the nation down there. So, real good game plan right there.
Our telephone number, 915-505-6009. His block rate is number one in the country, Sal, per KenPom. Yeah, 16.8 possessions. He's blocking a shot. That's pretty amazing. On 16% of every possession, he's blocking a shot, which is pretty awesome by Sharp down low, the big man. Let's keep it going on Twitter. Brandon Cox tweets the show. What a garbage team. Straight garbage. He was really frustrated in this one. Shannon Sharpie tweets the show. They are scrappy, hardworking. We are just missing one player. Hashtag MinerTalk. Do you think they're missing just one player, Sal?
I
don't think so.
I mean, I think it's tough to say that because... No, I think it goes far beyond one player for sure.
Well, my point about this is you can't take for granted getting one standout player. I mean, even last year with the Sule Boom, could Sule Boom be that much of a difference maker to make this team a top 3 team in Conference USA? Maybe, right? But I still feel like this team is missing maybe more than just one player now that we're seeing this team in the stretch of February. Remember, this month is going to be tough. If UTEP finishes this month with less wins than expected, then we kind of can see the red flags right here. These are some of the breadcrumbs right here that we're seeing from this team struggling through this stretch.
Yeah, and you know what? Kind of more on the one player part as well. I think it goes far beyond that because when you look at the top teams in Conference USA, I'll give you an example. You have a Jelly Walker and Eric Gaines with UAB. So
a duo.
You need a dynamic duo when it comes to it. So it would help. Don't get me wrong. They might squeeze out a win or two, here and there against a top team in Conference USA, but consistently, no, if you want to be one of the top dogs, you got to have a duo.
Yeah, I totally am with you on that, Sal. Let's keep it moving. Tristan Penn streets the show. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. Golding and his staff are not doing a good job here. The Miners play hard, but in many areas they have not improved and they've even regressed. There is still time for this team to turn things around, but it doesn't look promising. Well, you know what? Joe Golding was very blunt in his post-game press conference, I would say. He said, let's see which guys want to actually play throughout this stretch. Look, we could see the writing on the wall right there. Mario McKinney only plays 5 minutes, doesn't play anything in the second half. That's disappointing right there. They actually threw out Jamari Sibley today. We thought he was in the doghouse, but he ends up playing 18 minutes. And you know what, Sal? I did not like any of his minutes today. I thought he was very whatever. He was invisible. He just was not very impactful in this game. You didn't get anything from Derek Hamilton. He only played 2 minutes. Didn't get anything from Kevin Kalu. Only played 5. Didn't play, again, Mario McKinney much. So frustrating all around for this UTEP team. And I thought Calvin Solomon, who's been great down the stretch, struggled today, Sal. Kind of uncharacteristic game for him.
Yeah, and that's the problem there. Just the lack of offensive production from both. You brought up Sibley, you brought up Solomon. Well, I'll tell you, they'll have a 1-for-5 day, a piece. So that's definitely tough to watch. And then 4 of those 3-pointers that went up today, belong to Sibley and Solomon as well, where they were 0-for-4. So that's another tough thing too, is there wasn't much offensive production today when you really could have benefited from a couple more points to at least have a shot to maybe tie the game or not be in a desperate situation down the stretch.
King Eric tweets the show at King Eric 17. This whole season has been just disappointing. I didn't expect anything really, but to be leading at halftime and then having chances to win, it's just frustrating. Yeah, it's frustrating because UTEP's not closing out these games. I mean, Western Kentucky starts to distance themselves in the second half, and then UTEP still has a puncher's chance, but it feels like every time UTEP claws back, they rally back in games. Nowadays, now in this recent stretch, they're not able to win like they used to, and the Charlotte game is the exception. That's kind of that one exception out of the last month and a half. But still, I just feel like the Miners, when it's a close game, it usually tends to lean to the other team. They usually end up pulling that game away.
Yeah, and you wonder what it is. I mean, part of it is, just the other team staying a couple steps ahead, point blank period. But on the other part, too, is they dig themselves in holes or they have these droughts that make it harder for them to make it a game. So by the time they get there, how much gas has been burned to get to that point? I mean, it's not an excuse for sure, but I think it plays some part because we see a trend that they can fight with every team, but why are they not sealing the deal?
Yeah, I have no clue, Sal. Miner in Wisconsin tweets the show, Year 2 of Coach Golding is circling the drain. Year 3 needs to be much, much better than this. Do you think fans will have that kind of expectation, Sal? And if not, if the season starts off a little rocky next year, what do you think fans will say?
I think majority of them will be frustrated, of course, because it's kind of like, hey, we held out year 2. We knew that it was really year 1 if you think about it, year 2 being year 1. But going into year 3, all right, now there's a sample size that's large enough to form stronger opinions on. I think if there's a tough start, they'll say, hey, year 2, we gave you a pass. Now there's nothing happening at the start of year 3. There's going to be negativity for sure.
Yeah, I think there will be. I think that puts a little bit more pressure on the coaching staff. I'm curious just to see the changes we see over the offseason. Joe Golding was saying after the game that they didn't come out half good at all. Same story, just different game. And then the undisciplinary technical fouls by UTEP, he was criticizing those. Yeah, that's never been UTEP. That's what's so bizarre about this. That's the regression I think that some of the fans are pointing out right there, is the fact that you start to get these uncharacteristic things go on, like the technical foul. That's not happened at all. Now you're talking about a road swing in which the Miners had a Joe Golding technical on Thursday against Middle Tennessee, and then 3 technicals, one taken off for Mario McKinney, but 2 technicals recorded in this game. That's not a good look at all.
No, it's not, and it makes you wonder, obviously, what is the source of these if you're starting to see a lot in a small amount of time? And that's the concerning part, right? We know character-wise, pretty much all year it's been there, and I don't think that's my studio. I don't know if you guys can hear the hotline, but
yeah, we're good.
I lost my train of thought trying to – hold on one second. Let me answer this line.
Okay, no worries, Sal. Our telephone number now at 55505-6009. That's not us, Sal. No worries. That's KLAQ. Angel will get that. No worries. Our telephone number now at 55505-6009. Hey, real quick, women's basketball implosion today at home. 19-point lead erased in this game. Western Kentucky wins 77-75. Maybe celebrate a little too much Thursday, and as a result, Western Kentucky was overlooked today, and the Miners dropped that one. Very, very disappointing by them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 19-point lead going into the fourth quarter, and it was pretty much just a rout. In the fourth quarter, it's kind of like that. Obviously, we know score-wise it made up for the whole game, but just undoing everything that was done for the first 3 quarters in the final stretch is definitely brutal. And there was even a chance still, but something interesting that Zay tweeted out was that Western Kentucky's plan was just to make UTEP run. And it looks like they were out of gas. So also, too, a 7-person rotation that's got to wear in at some point. And on another part, Adrian, Middle Tennessee struggled against UTSA today. They lost.
I saw that. That's crazy. That's really interesting.
Not a good trip to Texas.
No, not a good trip to Texas whatsoever, Sal. Hey, our telephone number, 915-505-6009. What we're going to do right now is we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to have Hunter on the phone lines. We got a couple other tweets to get to as well. Stay with us as MinerTalk Sports Talk. MinerTalk continues. We're presented by the Oscar Arieta Agency. Later on in the show, we'll bring you our hot hand of the game brought to you by Wind Supply El Paso, and also our player of the game, thanks to Keith Southwest. You're listening to Miner Talk, brought to you by the Oscar Arieta Agency. More coming up right here on 600 ESPN El Paso. All right, welcome back. MinerTalk continues. We're presented by the Oscar Arieta Agency. Hunter is next on the phone lines. If you want to follow it up, 915-505-6009. You can also tweet the show at 600ESPN El Paso on Twitter. Hunter, good afternoon. What's going on?
Going on, guys? How are you?
We're hanging in, Hunter. Western Kentucky defeats UTEP 74-69. This is UTEP head coach Joe Golding's longest losing streak right now at 4 games.
You know, the question that someone asked, or I guess the statement someone made earlier about missing a player, is it depends who that player is. You know, if it was somebody that doesn't allow those long scoring droughts, maybe it makes a big difference. You know, we don't know, because that's kind of one of their biggest downfalls. They'll go on those 11-0 droughts or, 12-0 droughts pretty much every game, it seems. So maybe someone would help to stop that from getting out of control, but we don't know. I think the weirdest thing for me is Golding inherited a team last year that was obviously much more talented, but when he was frustrated with, and visibly so, yet he was able to get them to buy in, and they started clicking by the end, and they were, one play away from advancing to the semifinal of the tournament. This team he brought in, and it seemingly has his personality, but it looks like if he's lost most of them. Do you guys kind of get that sense?
Yes, I do. I don't think I wouldn't use the word lost the locker room. I wouldn't say that. But I also think that some of these guys, the message is not getting there. And we're also starting to see some of the guys kind of in a little bit of a doghouse. Like they have to kind of prove it. Like if it's not Kevin Kalu who only gets a couple minutes, then maybe it's Mario McKinney who gets benched after a bad foul. So yeah, I'm seeing that. I'm seeing frustration on the coaching side. Look at the Middle Tennessee game, Hunter. He was frustrated, and that's how he got a technical foul.
Yeah, I don't get it, because these are his guys, but like you said, something got lost where they didn't buy in, and it's clear that they're not all on the same page with him. So it's weird that he brought in his type of players. Maybe not the best offensively, but the whole thing was they'd be a cohesive, hardworking unit, and you don't see it. So, I don't see where he's going, and you can tell just by the post-game interview, he's just kind of short, doesn't really say a whole lot. There's some silent, awkward moments between him and Teicher, and you're left wondering what's really going on in that locker room. That's at least the feeling I get.
Yeah, I don't like when I see on TV. I mean, this is just TV, so I can't say much about it. I want to see it in person, but I don't like when I see on TV him ripping into some of the players out in the middle of like breaks, and I think it just becomes redundant at times. Like when you start yelling at guys, sometimes they start to tone you out, and that's not just Joe Golding. That's anything. And I do believe that some of the guys have ultimate buy-in. I believe that the majority of this team has ultimate buy-in. But if you have guys who start to not buy in, that could be cancerous and toxic to your team moving forward, especially for a month of February where, hey, you have Thursday, Saturday basketball all month long. There's no time for any kind of, stress or any kind of worrying on this team.
Yeah, it's just, it's a confidence thing, and they had it in that first half, and they just shot themselves in the foot a couple times with those technical fouls. But, I don't know if you noticed on one of the breaks, I think they were up 8 or 10, and he's ripping into them on the sideline.
Yeah, and even the commentators mentioned that, yes. Yeah,
they said you'd think they were the ones down by 10. And I get it. I'm sure he knows what he's doing as a coach. I'm still sold on Joe Golding. I just, in my opinion, he's lost this locker room a little bit. He's at least lost a couple of them, and negative attitudes. They're like a cancer. They'll spread, and so you got to squash that. But with this, do you see them being able to turn it around, even though it looks like they're not on the same page? And
no,
it's not?
I don't, Hunter, because the rest of the conference is really good right now. And I feel like even if UTEP actually turned it around, even at their best, I still don't see them beating some of these upper echelon teams. Even at their best, they're losing by 2 or 4 points to some of these great teams in Conference USA. Like they still have North Texas, Florida Atlantic, another game against Middle Tennessee, another game against FIU on their schedule, and those teams that I just reeled off right there have a better record than the Miners.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't get any easier, but if you were to make them click, I think these are all winnable games. Nobody – FAU kind of controlled the whole game, but at that they only lost by 8. Other than that, they're right there. They just need something to turn the corner. But
I don't agree with the North Texas. North Texas, I didn't think they stood a chance in that game in the second half.
No. I just think they're not outclassed in this league by much. This isn't a very good league. So if they would just get their own act together, they'd be all right. But if not, unfortunately, I think we'd be in for another completely different team next year, unless you all see it different.
No, I see it the same. I feel like if they're able to at least keep half their roster, that will just do good for them in terms of continuity. You can't have 10 newcomers next year, in my opinion. You have to have at least 7, 6 or 5 to 6 would be a nice number. And I'm thinking that, hey, you still want to replace some of the top guys. Like, if you have some of these rotational guys come back next year, I think that's valuable. If you have such talent in the transfer portal and you get and retool in the offseason to where you have Otis Frazier coming off the bench, that's where you need to be next year if you're Joe Golding in this team.
Yeah, there's no doubt, and he said it after the last game, I believe. Or I don't know if it was the last one or the one before. Actually, it was his show this week.
Yeah.
He talked about how frustrated he is and how he's not doing this again, and he's bringing in some scorers next year. But
he'll teach him how to play defense. He'll teach the scorers how to play defense. That's what he was saying.
He had to catch himself and say, I love coaching this team, though. But I still think they can at least be presentable. Right now it's not presentable. Hopefully they get there, but let's see how they finish it out.
All right. Hey, I appreciate the phone call, Hunter. Thanks for weighing in on the show. From Hunter to Ronnie. But before we get to Ronnie, Sal, I'll let you weigh in. Do you think Joe Golding's lost the team?
No, I wouldn't say lost the team. There's still a fighter's chance, so to speak. I think when you completely lose a team, you're getting blown out left and right. Like, yeah, players can carry, I guess if you want to make it look respectable, but not at this point, man. No way. So
yeah,
no, I still don't think he's lost control of the team, but for sure, we know he doesn't have them playing their best.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one, Sal. Let's keep it moving. 915-505-6009. Couple tweets to get to, but let's get to Ronnie. Hey, Ronnie, before we bring you on, UTEP Zay had a great quote to me the other day when we were talking off air about you. He was like, hey, Ronnie has to get a lot of credit because he's right about a lot of things. And UTEP Zay was referencing at the end of last year, you referenced that UTEP would have a down year this year, and Miner fans would have to brace for that under head coach Joe Golding.
I appreciate UTEP Zay paying attention. Shout out to UTEP Zay for that. I want to say something to you guys, and this is a serious statement.
Okay.
And I love Joe Golding, as I know we all do. And Joe Golding is a hell of a coach. I'm not disputing that. But is Joe Golding the right coach for the Miners, and what all comes with being a Miners head coach? Right? Like, we got to take a serious deep breath and think about that, because here's what I mean by that. You're seeing some things from last year repeat itself in a negative way. When you talk about him yelling at players, no one cared when he was doing that last year at UAB when he was ripping Saucy out of the game and yelling at Saucy several games and starting them and taking them right out a minute into the game. No one cared because they said, well, that's not his player, so he didn't recruit him. Didn't owe him anything. Okay, but now he's doing it with the guys that he did recruit, that he did bring here. So maybe, just maybe, and once again, Joe Golding's a hell of a coach. I'm not saying he's not a great coach, but every great coach, the situation isn't right for him. Maybe this situation was more tumultuous than he anticipated, and maybe he didn't get some of the recruits he anticipated, a la one of the Newtons, because he didn't have the right staff that can get recruits. And so, therefore, this just might not be the job for Golding, and that's okay. He's still going to give it his all. He's still going to do everything he can to make it competitive. But I'm sorry, man. People need to wake up. 2 years ago, we knocked Rodney Terry for his inability to coach in X and O's. But what would you rather have? Rodney Terry's talent, a la, which is what Golding had last year, or Joe Golding's players who play hard but just can't win you games because they don't have talent? If we lined up Terry and Golding right now and said, Golding, take your team, Terry, take your team, and go play a 7-game playoff series, we both know Terry's team probably sweeps Golding's kids right out the building. So we need to ask ourselves, is this the right job for Golding? right? Because Golding was going to get a head coaching job at a higher level anywhere with what he did at ACU, and he deserved that. But once again, was this the right job for Terry? Because Terry looks damn good at Texas, you know? So, I mean, we just need to be real about what's going on here. And it's not easy recruiting to Sun City. I get it. But recruiting has to be at the forefront no matter who the coach is, whether it's Demo, Terry, or Golding. You have to get impact players. And that collective that Golding wants to do, I'm sorry. I was on board with that. I'm not now. I say get $50,000 each to the best players you can get because you need studs right now. You don't need a team full of duds. You need studs. So go get 2 studs that you can play through and go give them all the money and let all the other kids get the free tuition and books like it's been for, ever since college started. But giving every kid a piece of the pie will leave you with a bunch of kids who are just that, a small piece of the pie. You need something that's the appetizer and the main course. And then that kid is about to be Big East Player of the Year in Sule Boone.
Yeah.
Dante Kennedy looks really good. He's moving to the star lineup at Memphis now. I mean, so once again, we just got to ask ourselves, the way that Golding wants to do it with his old school approach, his defensive approach, maybe that's just not going to be the right way to do it in the Sun City with the talent that he can attract here. And that's no knock on his coaching. I'm not taking away from his coaching at all. He is a far better coach than Rodney Terry when it comes to X's and O's. But quite frankly, we live in a what have you done for me lately type of world. And
that's right
now, UTEP is struggling to find its way. And if you guys think with how that staff is constructed right now, that Golding will be able to just go out and land 2 studs and say, oh, I'm going to give you $10,000. I know you probably get offers of 50, 60, 70 somewhere else, but this is just how we do it here. That's just not going to happen, man. Like, you're not going to get 2 dudes to say, okay, I'm going to turn down a lucrative 5-figure deal to go be a part of something that you're trying to build, because here's why. The kids don't see the blueprint. Like, every year that the game changes and moves on, Joe Golding gets a year further away from what he did at ACU, which means the kid that he's recruiting is one more year likely less to remember that. You see what I'm saying? So you start to have to really have something tangible to show these kids, because what you did somewhere else isn't matching up to what you're doing here in this situation.
And okay, I got 2 points on you. I would just say this. It's interesting you bring up the coaching staff. It's interesting you value recruiting this high, which I agree. Nowadays in college basketball, and to your point, Ronnie, I just want to make this point really known for some of our listeners who might not value recruiting as much as us or as much as we talk about it here on this show. Recruiting is the most important. It is the backbone of your team. In fact, if you were going to hire an associate head coach to run X's and O's for you, you might want to pay somebody equally on your staff who's going to go out and recruit you some of the best players out there in college basketball. Recruiting should be valued just as much as X's and O's in college basketball, and that's just how good teams are built. It's just the bottom line. But if I told you this, that Joe Golding does not have the right resources in his favor to go out and recruit some of these guys, I think you'd probably understand where I'm coming from on this. And I think UTEP is behind the times in a lot of these things. It's factual. It's not just a speculation. They are behind the times in the NIL collective. Even if they launch that next year, which is, everything is pointing to being possible for that. Even if they launch that, they're still behind the times by years. I mean, you should have started that 2 years ago when the NIL rule first passed. UAB's out there with their NIL collective. UTSA has multiple NIL collectives. Western Kentucky, they're paying players as well. And unfortunately, Miner fans don't like to hear this kind of stuff, but UTEP does not have the right resources to recruit the right players. I'll give you a perfect example. Somebody who is just a rotational player on a very important team in college basketball. I'm talking about the UConn Huskies. Joey Calcaterra. He took a trip here to El Paso, and UTEP was recruiting him hard. Well, he ends up going to UConn. He's just a rotational player. He's like a 7th man on their team coming off the bench. But you know what he does? He splashes threes. He's like a very valuable part to their team. He's shooting about 42% from three-point range, one of the best three-point shooters in the country. And that's what UTEP needs. They need to start landing some of those players who end up going to higher major schools, and it's through NIL deals. So resources is kind of the biggest thing right there. So I'll let you jump in before we let Ronnie jump back in.
And you know what, too, when it comes to the NIL, a lot of those teams that you mentioned who are big in the NIL, although it may not have been an official part of it, but when the promotions were made to the American Athletic Conference, a lot of those teams you just mentioned, they're going on to the American. What part does that NIL play in, the conferences saying, hey, we prefer XYZ team over?
That's very true.
You know what I mean? Over
That's very
UTEP,
true.
Over Western Kentucky, who's doing it already.
No, it's a really good point because, and I'll bring that was to my next point, kind of along the next point that I was going to bring up to Ronnie's points right there. Conference USA might just be a down conference. You might be losing some of these guys simply because they want to go to a better conference. Sule Boom wants to play in the Big East, and he's playing top 25 teams left and right in the Big East. He's on national television every single night. You look at Conference USA, this one's on Stadium over here. We're having to go on a website trying to find this game over here. This is ridiculous, and that really does hurt some of your transfers. It hurts some where you are and how you're viewed in the transfer portal. And to your point, Ronnie, I think if you're asking me, hey, is Joe Golding the guy? Is he the guy who's going to help UTEP? I think UTEP's just kind of a very hard school to actually win at. So when you look at all the resources that are lacking, you look at the situation that's there, it's really to no fault of UTEP's own, except for, I guess you can point the finger at UTEP for not starting the NIL collective a lot earlier.
Well, I'm not going to blame Golding if UTEP is behind in some areas because I know that is true. You're absolutely right. But that goes to my point again. Did he get into a situation where he thought he had more resources and support that actually just didn't deliver? Maybe. Deliver for him, right? Because
maybe.
I'm going to tell you something. I watched Chris Jans have a horrible season in the COVID year, and he's kicking ass at Mississippi State right now with more resources. So, I mean, and he went to the
same with Jerome Tang. Look at Jerome Tang.
Jerome Tang, dudes get it done, man. Dudes get it done at the end of the day. And I'm not taking away from Golding's X's and O's. I believe Golding. I know you listen to the show, Golding. You're an excellent coach, but you need a strong recruiter. You need a guy that you say, hey, I don't care if you coach the kids. Matter of fact, don't say nothing to them. Just get them here. Get me elite talent, and then I'll do the rest. That's what Steve Alford does. Steve Alford doesn't recruit a single kid because he has no personality to relate to kids. He let Craig Neal recruit every single kid to Nevada, and that's what they do.
When can Joe Golding find his Arturo Orman?
Arturo's in Eastern Washington. I'm sure he'd love to come back, so he better figure it out. I mean, he had an NBA player attached to him or a borderline NBA guy for that matter.
That's right. Hey, he's in the G League. Shout out Bryson Williams.
Yeah, he's making great money too. So
that's right.
In all seriousness, I want to see Golding succeed. I want to see the Miners succeed. But like I said, man, right now that team literally, the more I watch them, it's just like, man, they're getting so if you watch Middle Tennessee State game, they were giving up drives to the rim left and right. It was that's not even what the Golding kids do. So
I know.
To the previous caller's point, I do believe that Golding has lost this team. I do believe he has. And here's how we know he has. Last year, Golding would switch that lineup. He wouldn't get in kids' face. He would just make adjustments and switch the lineup. He's yet to do that because he doesn't believe that the kids on the bench you believe in the system or are going to either execute it. Either way, it comes down to trust. And he just has no trust in anybody outside of that starting five. You know what I mean? So it's that tells me that the team's lost, man. When you have to keep playing with a product that can't deliver, and it's the lesser of two evils, that is a lost team in the course of a season. Let's be real here, right? You're not going to play Mitchell Trubisky if you have to. You know what I mean? If you got another choice, you're going to switch and get the hell out of there. It's the same thing, man. He has a losing product on the floor, but he feels that those five are the lesser of the evils and have bought in, I guess, to a certain level that maybe the other kids haven't. You've lost the team, man. And once you lose, 4 or 5 of them, these kids follow each other nowadays. There's no backbone, especially on losing teams.
And you get a lot of that cancerous and toxic culture that we were just talking about, and that's what Joe Golding didn't want from last year's team. He felt like last year's team had a lot of divas at points, and he's said that publicly, and he said that where you've had a lot of personalities, guys who were kind of entitled, so to speak, and he didn't want that this year. And I don't think it's entitlement with this group. I just think it's frustration. When you lose games like this, when you've lost 9 of your last 12 games, people are starting to point fingers in the locker room. And hey, Ronnie, I appreciate the phone call, man. Thanks for weighing in on the show. Sal, I'll bring you back in. I still don't think Joe Golding has lost the locker room. I think that's pretty. I think it's kind of over the top to say, but I do think that we're kind of pointing this right here as a red flag part of the season. I don't know how the UTEP turns the corner here and moves forward.
Yeah, and the interesting part is I think this episode more than other episodes is that now it's not necessarily about, the numbers themselves. It's kind of like, hey,
that's right.
It goes far beyond stats. It's more of just, coaching when it comes down to it, as opposed to, if they get XYZ more than this, they'll be good. But no, I think this kind of has a feel more for like, hey, it goes far beyond these X's and O's.
We're going to get to 2 more tweets. We're going to get to our awards, and then we're going to wrap up this show and look ahead to Charlotte. This coming in from Manny David. Frustrating season for sure, especially when being down 5 feels like being down 10 at times. Only Golding's second season. I like the defense, but they need to improve the offense. Hopefully we can bring in a couple of scoring threats next season. Hashtag MinerTalk, hashtag picks up, hashtag go Miners. Adrian at Enemy Win 3 tweets the show, stop making excuses for Golding, calling it technically year 1. No one ever did that for Rodney Terry, and he lost a lot of players too, and he went to reload. I'm out on Golding. Wow. Whoa. There we go. There's the first one. Mark it right there. Adrian at Enemy Win 3 sees the a little hypocrisy that he's trying to point out right there. Look, I'll say this, Adrian, just to show you some differences right here. Rodney Terry was 8-21 in his first year. He publicly said that was the JV team and that the varsity team would be coming after that. That was also in the period of when the coaching staff still had those things where they had to deal with the 1-year transfer rule, where it was like you had to sit out a year when you transferred. So I'm not going to fault Rodney Terry too much, but I will say after that 8-21 season, they go 17-15, which was just above 500, and they were below 500 in conference play. I did not think that was a good season whatsoever. So I thought that was actually a letdown season, knowing how much talent they had on the floor. And then when you look at the other season after that, 12-12, 8-8, that's a 500 season right there. So again, I don't consider that a success. I consider last year a success for Golding. He was 11-7 in conference play, 20-14 overall. They won 20 games last year and made it to postseason hoops. And then this year, I think it's a letdown, but you know what? We'll have to see year 3 to really make an assessment as to how Joe Golding really is as a head coach. And then also, Sal, we said it before and we'll say it again, Joe Golding had to re-recruit all of Rodney Terry's guys. Sule Boom could have left easily. He could have gone high major last year easily. No question about it. But he chose to stay along with guys like Keontae Kennedy, Titus Verhoeven, and Jamal Bienemy.
Yeah, all guys from what? The transfer portal,
Exactly.
Basically, all of them left UTEP for the transfer portal too, except Bienemy went pro. So,
correct.
Either way, though, in terms of the re-recruitment, I think that's a good point because you look at some of these other guys who left UTEP and they thrived. Caden Archie was one of them. You even want to look at some other guys. Just trying to remember a lot more guys. There was so many that left UTEP through the transfer portal that shined.
Right. Anthony Tark.
That's another one. Nigel Hawkins too had some stuff going on. So.
Sure.
That's the crazy part, just looking at how it's benefited and then also more recently how it's hurt. So it's just tough to make up this transfer portal.
Our telephone number, 915-505-6009. If you'd like to duck in a late call, that's our telephone number to get into the show. Paul Marmolejo with a hashtag UTEP is average, hashtag UTEP is mediocre. Okay, I like that, Paul. Hilarious. And the other one, Wise Up 915.
Oh,
that's a good one. That's the one I was commenting on. That was pretty good. Sal, let's get to some awards here on the show, and then we're going to wrap this one up. Looking ahead to next week, Miners host Charlotte and then UTSA. Give me your prediction. Charlotte, UTSA, do they split it? Do they sweep the series, or do they go winless in that stretch?
I think they split, but they beat UTSA.
Okay, so that would mean UTEP loses 5 in a row before getting their first win. That's tough right there. Miners have to try to get a win between now and then. I think UTEP sweeps next week. I'm gonna feel a little bit more optimistic about the Miners, and I think they kind of turn the corner next week. So I'm thinking they beat Charlotte at home and then they beat UTSA, but we'll see how that goes. Let's go to our hot hand of the game. This is presented by Win Supply El Paso. In the first half, Shamar Givens had 12 points. He finished the game with 18 overall to lead the Miners. He is the hot hand of this -1, 5 of 8 in the first half. He also contributed in this game with 4 rebounds in the first half. The one technical was tough for Shamar Givens, and you hope that the grad transfer definitely learns from that in the future. So Shamar Givens ending up being our Hot Hand Award winner. You could stay on schedule with Wind Supply El Paso and see why home builders make Wind Supply El Paso their trusted HVAC system supplier. Go online to windsupplyelpaso.com or call them 915-859-3817. That's Wind Supply El Paso. As far as our player of the game, I love the game from Otis Frazier III. I thought he played exceptionally well. 2 of 4 from beyond the arc, 17 points. Second leading scorer for the Miners, had 5 rebounds, 1 steal, 2 turnovers, 30 minutes of action, was UTEP's most efficient player at +16 in this game. Otis Frazier III, our player of the game, and that's brought to you by Keats Southwest. They are the leaders in the industry in precision metal stamping since 1958. You can get in touch with them today online at KeatsMFG.com or give them a call, and that is Keats Southwest. You can give them a call today. That is 915-859-0059, and that's Keats Southwest. Let's turn the page and look ahead, Sal. It's Charlotte, it's UTSA next week. It's a home and away series for the Miners, and then they have UAB and North Texas at home. Do they win 3? I mean, do they lose 3 of these next 4 games, Sal? This is tough. This is a tough stretch right here.
Oh, man, it's definitely a possibility. I'm looking at this stretch here. I know you mentioned that you feel they'll get the sweep. I think it'll be a split with the win at UTSA, but the way they're playing right now, there's a lot to be questioned, right? Like, hey,
yes.
If you had to ask yourself, what are some reasons that would make me believe UTEP could win this game? It's hard to say that something exists. We know that they'll fight. That's not a problem. They're going to be, in the arena, but are they going to be able to seal the deal if they have a chance?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think so, Sal. I don't think that's the case right there. Unfortunately for UTEP, but I'm rough. I think it's a rough stretch for them. Charlotte, UTSA, UAB, North Texas. What a tough stretch for this team. Let's see what they can do next week against formidable opponents, teams that they should beat, but yeah, this is the last stretch of the season. You don't want UTEP to be sour at the midway point here in February. So that's the biggest thing. Staying intact, trying to finish the season off strong. Their projected record is 14-17. I would feel like that's a letdown. What about you, Sal?
Definitely so, especially after winning 20 games last year. But you mentioned the 14-17 projected record. Would you be surprised if it ends up being 14-17?
No, I wouldn't. I would not. That would mean they lose to Charlotte, lose to UAB, North Texas, lose to FIU and FAU, and their last wins come against Western Kentucky, Middle Tennessee, and UTSA. Even that Middle Tennessee win, I think that's a stretch right there, even though that's senior day at home. But hey, we'll have to wait and see. Well, UTEP's are 11-12 right now. 14 wins seems achievable. I still think 15 is achievable as well, but I don't know. This team is just so up and down, inconsistent, and don't like the way that they're playing during this stretch. But that'll do it for us here on this show. Really appreciate everybody calling in on the show and tweeting in on the program as well. Want to also give a big shout out to Sal Montes for screening the phones, producing the show, co-hosting us with us as well. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen to MinerTalk on demand wherever you listen to podcasts. But for Sal Montes, I'm Adrian Broadus. We're signing off and saying so long. MinerTalk is presented by the Oscar Arieta Agency, and we'll talk to you next week right here on 600 ESPN El Paso.